Hey everyone, welcome back to the Creatively Thinking podcast. Join Carolyn Botello as she uncovers the inspirations behind some incredibly creative minds that are orbiting our local communities. Hi, Bev Morgan. Happy to finally meet you. I discovered you on Facebook, where I found your work truly inspiring. You are an artist and teacher who primarily works in watercolor. Can you share with our audience how you decided on watercolor as your primary medium? I thought this was one of the hardest mediums to master. What made you decide on this difficult medium?
Hi, Carolyn. Watercolors is one of the art that I really captured and got to know really fast. Back in 1996, I met with the fellow artist Lynn Soulier, who introduced me to the medium. And at that point, myself and my two children, who were young teenagers, we would take art lessons from Lynn in the evenings. And then I did some other workshops with her during the day. And after a year, she encouraged me to become a member of the Stratford Guild of Artists. So I felt very honored that she kind of encouraged me to go forward and develop my painting. And throughout the years, I enrolled in other artists' classes. And I developed my own style of painting, learning what I liked about the process. I have heard many times that this medium is not forgiving. Students learn about transparent pigments that can be used on top of each other. That way you can see the existing color below, and you can learn opaque pigments that you can't see anything below. And I always share with my students a secret. If you use the watercolors that are liftable, that means you can take it off your paper. You can avoid any issues or mistakes, so you can fix it. So it is very forgiving.
Well, that's great. That's great that there are ways around it to make the medium just that much easier. When you teach, what is it about your students that inspires your creative practice? Is it the act of teaching and sharing your knowledge, or is it seeing how they translate your skill into their imagination? Does teaching fuel your imagination by fueling your students?
That's a good question. I love sharing my passion of watercolors to others, and I bring them their own style coming out in their own personality. So it brings me great joy. My classes are usually structured, and I provide the same reference, and I provide step-by-step instructions from the beginning to the end of the painting. But I also express to them that I'm providing a recipe of how to paint, how to mix the colors, the whole process, so that way they can use that guide for their own future paintings. When I first started, I remember a class from Lynn. She had a sandy beach with waves. So I used all her instructions, and I developed my own painting just by looking how she did it, what colors she mixed. So I always encourage students to look at, this is the process I'm showing them, rather than dictating of what they can use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you ever have students sort of question the way you instruct them, like try to, I don't know, give you just a challenge to your sort of recipe that you give them?
Oh, I tell them to challenge me, and I also tell them to go ahead and try another color because it's just more or less let them develop their own painting. And at the end, we may start with the same reference, but it always turns out a little bit different. And I tell them, sometimes I repeat these classes, and I said, you know what? Instead of using this color that I used before, I'm going to try this one. So it's just trying to encourage them to experiment on their own.
Yeah, and then keep it new for every time you're teaching that specific class. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it that led you down this path initially as an artist? Was it working with your hands, your emotional insights, or something else? Can you share with our audience what was it in the beginning that caused you to choose this creative path?
At the beginning, I didn't have a creative path because when I grew up, I lived in a small town not far from Chatham, Ontario. There was no opportunity to learn about art. I remember in high school years when the guidance counselor, they pull you in and say, what kind of career would you like? Well, I only had three choices, I remember: nursing, teaching, or to become a secretary. Art was never offered during my high school years, but it didn't stop me. I really enjoyed sketching throughout those years. So my creative path just started back there, but it wasn't developed yet. And then I started developing it as after my children was interested in art, and I took them for weekly lessons in painting with Lynn Suyer in Stratford. And I also had a full-time job working in a hospital laboratory. So at this point, it was a new medium I shared with my children. And at the end of that time, I started doing a small little business with Stratford Realtors as a gift for anybody that's sold their home. They would give me a photograph of their home, and I remember doing many paintings, watercolor paintings of houses. So I would sell them to the realtor for a good price at that time, $50. It was so I did a painting, and they gave it to as a gift for the person that left the home. But anyway, it's just started to kind of beginning of my art career.
And it kind of snowballed after that, I guess, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And then when we moved to Hanover from Stratford, when I worked at the hospital, this hospital staff would ask me, how do you do watercolors? Well, I said, okay, well, I could teach you. I could show you in the evenings. I could show you on the weekends. So it snowballed. I was doing two careers at the last 10 years of working at the hospital, that whenever I had a day off, I would teach a class. There was a lot of people in Hanover that were learning how to paint. And then I had developed an art studio. I was invited to go paint nights. The libraries was always interested of having someone to show painting to adults as well as children. There's a campground near Hanover, and every August I would go spend a week at the campground and do 2-hour classes, whoever's at the campground. And then I got associated with Southampton Art School, and then I started teaching there. And then from there, I did cruise ships. When I knew I was getting close to retirement at the hospital, I taught on cruise ships. And when COVID began, I did Zoom lessons. So it all kind of snowballed. And then I started teaching online. I'm pre-recorded classes online on udemy.com. But like you say, it snowballed. You do one thing, and then it kind of exploded a little bit more as the years have gone by.
Can we go a little bit deeper into the cruise ships? Because I remember when I saw that on your Facebook page, your Facebook link, and I was like, whoa, that's just I've never heard of that. Like, how did that just? I know you said it snowballed, but there must be something that's just a little bit more to it that you can expand on.
Oh, well, when I was close to retired at the hospital, I sent an email or resume to cruise ships. I had no clue how to go about doing it. It was just something I was interested in doing. I've never been on a cruise ship in my life before that. I thought, well, that'd be different. So no response, no response at all from anybody. So I just happened to Google one evening on the Google. I said, watercolors teaching on cruise ships. Well, what came up was a watercolor artist just returning from the Queen Mary 2 cruise ship. How he explained how he taught his classes, had a great time, saw different places. And then at the very end of his article, he said he went through this agency. So that kind of had a little bell in my head to have to go through agencies. So the agency screened me. I had to send references from 2 art gallery directors. I had to send a resume of all teaching experience I had. We had a phone interview as well. So I was, they did a complete screening of what my background was.
Yeah.
So I was back in 2015. My first excursion was on the Queen Mary 2, leaving New York City. And it was a 175 years celebration at the Cunard Cruise Line. And it would go to have the same voyage that was done 175 years ago. So it went from New York, Southampton, Hamburg, Germany, back to Southampton, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Boston, New York, Boston, and ended up in New York. So it was about 22 days. So I couldn't believe it. I got accepted with that cruise ship. It was just such a thrilling experience. So again, I have now 2 cruise agencies. It's good. Get an email. If I go somewhere once a year, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's nice because you get your holidays and sort of it's a working holiday kind of thing, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But there's preparation involved.
Yeah.
Depending on the ship that you go on, some ships provide everything.
Well, that's nice. Yeah.
For example, the Queen Mary and the Cunard ships, the Queen Elizabeth, they have a $35 US kit that the passengers buy. So it's a little watercolor cotton kit, as well as a pad of paper, 4 brushes, and a pencil and eraser. So I really enjoy going on those ships because I don't have to bring any of those art supplies in my suitcase.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. But I still bring my paperwork because everyone in my classes have 1 page, 4 steps how to do a painting. So when I teach a class, if they can't hear me or can't remember what colors we're using, everything is in front of them. And I just figured they can always take their little painting as well as instruction home and maybe get encouraged to learn how to do painting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said the Cunard ship. Well, that was like they were doing a excursion that had been done 175 years ago. Is that the one that you were talking about?
Yeah, that was my very first introduction.
Wow, that's just that's really impressive.
At every port, they had a celebration. They had fireworks. They had guest speakers, a lecture. Every port that we went to, they were celebrating the whole Cunard celebration, 175 years. It was such a fantastic experience. Like they had, how we have the snowbirds here in Canada. They had UK birds flying on top of the ship. They had the fireworks. I just couldn't believe it. It was just a fantastic time.
Mm-hmm.
The first time for me to go on a ship.
Yeah, that's a nice sort of introduction for you to the whole experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How has being a teacher helped shape you professionally? Have you explored the gallery circuit? Have you worked with other artists? And how has this encouraged or influenced your creativity? Do you see your painting path as one that has inspired your students to continue this creative journey for themselves?
As an instructor, I am always trying to approach a painting with new techniques and tips for my students to use. I have expanded this medium into other mediums, such as scratch art, photography, and batik. Because as a teacher, you're always learning, you're always evolving. You're always trying to find new things that you can show or demonstrate. My greatest thrill is to see my students go on, develop their own style, and become professional artists themselves. And then I've had them ask me to become their mentor. So I'm always in the background if they have any questions or even just as support, or if they have any questions, about the art. My own professional, usually they ask, how'd you do this, Bev? And so I would explain it. But as a challenge for myself, every January I begin a new series of paintings. For example, I studied and visit all the waterfalls in our Grey Bruce areas and counties. And I didn't stop there. I traveled around Ontario and I did